Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Montana World Affairs Council GeoQuest program. Before we start off, I would like to thank our GeoQuest sponsors, Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance, Cutter Foundation International, Trail West Bank, and First Interstate Bank. Over to you, Allie.
Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. I'm so honored to welcome our special guests today from both France and Montana, which I think is going to offer a really fun and unique cultural perspective. And we have, looks like we've got Bozeman on the line, and oh, I see some friends in Drummond. Hello, Jody. It's nice to see you. And let's go ahead. I would love to introduce to you Laurence Markarian. How did I do?
You did fabulously.
Thank you. Laurence grew up in France and she graduated with majors in international commerce and translation in English, French, and German. She has a tutoring business in Hamilton and an import online retail store specializing in French products. Oh, that sounds fantastic. She is a blogger, a contributor to France Magazine, and a competitive screenwriter for feature movies. Okay, there's already so much that I want to know more about. One of her scripts was recently nominated at the Paris Art and Movie Awards. Congratulations. She has been an honorary consul of France for the state of Montana for the past 11 years. So welcome. Thank you so much. We're going to keep this relatively informal today, but we do want to hit on a couple different parts. Students across the state have been learning about the culture, the youth, the economics, the geography, and then global good news coming from several focus countries. One of those is France. And so throughout the course of the day, we'd like to hit on each of those topics. And I know that our students in Bozeman have some great questions. Drummond, if you also have some questions, that's totally fine. You get to ask questions too. Please go ahead, feel free to chat and talk with us and ask those questions. So can we just first start off by, Laurence, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit more in depth, maybe how you got to Montana?
All right, so I was a student in France. I grew up in France, was born, grew up in France, and I did all my studies there. And actually, the very last year that I was in business school, there was a students' contest that was organized by the French American Chamber of Commerce. And the prize was actually a big prize because it was to fly the winning student to Los Angeles with some people who were some business people who were trying to market their French products. And on that year, there was actually a large convention that was focused on French products in Los Angeles, in California. And after 7 days of intense competing, I was very lucky to be the designated student to fly. So that's what got me to the United States. And on that particular show, actually, I met my husband to be. And that's really what gave me my start. So of course, I went back to France for a couple of years, and I was spending a lot of money going back and forth to the United States and France, and to see this wonderful guy that I had met. Anyway, I moved to San Francisco. We got married and I moved to San Francisco. So first, when I came to the United States, I lived in San Francisco for 6 or 7 years. And then, and the reason why I mentioned my husband is because everything is really focused around my husband with this move to Montana. He's the one who knew Montana. He was in love with Montana. He used to play cowboy in Montana. He was a businessman, but he came to Montana often to play cowboy, to ride horses, to fly fish, etc. And he told me one day, he said, I really want to move to Montana. And that's what got us to Montana. So that's my background. I love Montana. I love to go back to to California, San Francisco. I go to San Francisco for yearly meetings at the consulate every year. I love traveling. I go back to France often, of course, because I have all my family there. But Montana is really my home. I feel very comfortable, very happy, very content in Montana. And I've been the honorary consul of France, as you mentioned, for almost 12 years now. I love representing France in Montana. Does that answer your question?
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I want to just start us off with a little culture question, because I think you're posed perfectly to answer this. So what were some of the initial culture differences from when you first moved to France and now, and then what still catches your attention even today?
What catches my attention here in Montana or in France when I go back to France?
Also, so first off, what were the first part of the question is, what are the, like, when you first moved, what were some of the biggest cultural differences between the United States and France?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you're going to like it. I have to be honest with you because I have to answer your question honestly. When I got to Los Angeles, so that's back in 1986, my very first trip to the United States. I had never been to the United States. I was at the baggage claim because in those days you did not have carry-ons. So I was waiting for my luggage at the airport, at the international airport in LAX. And I was waiting for my luggage. And all I could hear was women with big, loud voices. And I thought, these American women are so loud. And that really caught my attention. That's the very first thing that caught my attention. And then there were, different things. When you travel, when you land into a country that you don't know, of course, you have everything to learn. I was joined by the other people that we were going to meet, so that we would all go to the convention, the trade show together. And we kind of, met at the hotel because we all had booked rooms in that same hotel in Los Angeles. And then we were hungry. So we went to a pizza shop very close to the airport. It was the Hilton at the airport. And there was a pizza place. And being from France, we thought of ordering individual pizzas, because in those days and still now, when you order pizza, you think of, 7-inch regular pizza. I mean, a 7-inch diameter pizza. So it's individual. So one of them said, "Can you order this for me?" I was the only one who really spoke English fluently. I still had a scholar English, but not, I spoke English probably the best of the group, not great, but the best. And they said, "Okay, we rely on you, just order pizza. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that." So with 7 people, we ended up with 7 pizza. We were waiting and waiting. And when they presented the bill to us, I thought there's something terribly wrong. Well, we had ordered 7 large pizzas for probably 8 to 12 people, when we meant to order individual pizza, 7 individual pizza. So I can tell you that we were already spending a lot of money on just a very, very mediocre pizza. But it's just because cultural shock. You see, you think pizza, I'm going to order pizza for me, not for a group. So you get it. It's kind of it's part of traveling. So there are a lot of things, that I don't know if they shocked me, but that are very different. The way people engage in conversations. The next day we were at the trade show, and I was going back and forth between booths because I was helping each and every businessman with translation, interpreting, etc. And the way American people were, you're going to think that it's actually very, very strange that I say that, but American people were much more friendly, much more personal. They were more engaging, at least when I first was introduced to them, or I introduced myself and other people to them. They made us much more comfortable than French people. French people tend to be more distant. Now, things have changed. And when you go to France, you feel that there is not that gap that used to be. And I think that it's a generation awareness that younger people are more aware. First of all, younger people learn foreign languages in school, and I did, but the people before me, the next generation before me, did not learn foreign languages. So by learning foreign languages, it gives you an openness to the world, and I don't know, it just gives you something else that makes you aware that you're not the hub of the universe. You're you have an environment around you, and everybody's kind of equal. Nobody stands out. Whereas 30 years ago, 35 years ago, there was more of a gap. That the French tended to be more distant, almost a little bit arrogant. And the American people, in comparison, were extremely welcoming and warm and engaging right from the get-go without even knowing you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Mrs. Walder-Drake's class, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you have, especially around culture, or we'll keep it open.
So students are asking questions, or is that what you're
yes, we'll wait for a question from Mrs. Walder-Drake's class.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have kind of one cultural question and then one question about your job. Kind of what is your job and what is the favorite part of your job? And then also, what movies have you written?
So my job as within the framework of my functions with the consulate, is that it?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So very quickly, and I think that it can be very useful for your students there to know that France is one of the most represented countries in the world. Every single country in the world has an embassy in all the other countries. But France has more than an embassy. Our embassy for France is in Washington, D.C., but because of the size of the United States, there are also, I should say, 6 regional consulates, and each consulate is divided into states. So basically, there is one consul of France in each state, and I'm the honorary consul. So I'm attached to the circumscription of San Francisco, and the consul of San Francisco is really my boss. So my job in Montana, just like any honorary consul of France in Utah, in Wyoming, in Oregon, in Washington, anywhere, any state in the United States, represents French people who live in Montana, but also French people who happen to be tourists in Montana. We have a lot of tourists in the summer. Sometimes one tourist breaks a leg in Glacier Park or has an accident of some kind. Can be a motorcycle accident. It can be some trouble with the law. It can be not very long ago when we had all the floods in Yellowstone, even though Yellowstone is, for the most part in Wyoming, there were some French people who were in one of the lodges, and they had rented a car. They had to evacuate. They could not understand exactly what the innkeeper was telling them to do. So we help French people when there are situations of difficulty to to communicate. If one of them were to be incarcerated, we have to go visit. We have to make sure that there is a good communication between them and the family in France. So it's not only passports and visas, even though we don't take care of visas anymore. It's a private service that does it, but we answer questions on how to do it. I have people coming to get their nationality, their certificate of nationality when they want to be naturalized. After all is done, they come to me and I give them that certificate. They come to me with questions in general. How do we renew passports? How do I get a visa? Not very long ago, I had a couple, two wonderful guys from France who had come to Missoula to pick up a baby. There was actually a woman that that was a I can't remember what you call them in English, but she carried that baby for 9 months for them, and they came. They had a passport for the baby. I had to take pictures of the baby because the baby was leaving the country with 2 foreigners. I mean, not really foreigners, they were French, but they, you know, they had done so much paperwork that it felt that they were members of the family. But so it really is extremely diversified and very interesting. Sometimes I get phone calls from companies, TV stations who want to do a documentary in Montana. So I help them connect with the right people. If they want to find some people who actually place cameras in bear dens during the winter, they ask me, you know, how do we contact these people? Can you put us in touch with these people? Years ago, like 7 or 8 years ago, I had Ubisoft, which is a big company. Probably your audience knows them because they make a lot of video games. Now big, and they were actually doing Call of Duty, number whatever, and they had a long list of 30 different things that they were waiting for, and they, you know, they needed help to find the right people. They needed, you know, to film a cattle drive, because evidently when they do movies, they actually would rather do the actual footage and then they turn it into animated than actually create those video games from scratch. So it's very interesting. It's not just administrative, like, you know, passports and visas. It's also lots of interaction between, you know, between very interesting people. So to go to movies. So yes, I studied movies. I mean, I started actually with musicals. I wrote a musical many years ago, which took me a long time to do, and then I became very busy, very busy, and I put all my writing aside. And 2 years ago, I actually revisited everything on that about that musical. The musical is called Philip's Escape, and it's actually being licensed right now. So I'm actually going to present it to some theaters in Montana, including Missoula. I would very much like Missoula to be open to a local writer for musical, especially that it was done in a very professional way. All the sound recordings have been done professionally, etc. And what I write is mostly about France, not all of it, but mostly about France, about the relationships between France and the United States. Or it can be one of them is French yeehaw. So you can tell that it has a strong influence of Montana. And it has, you know, obviously it's the story of a French chef who wants to be a cowboy in Montana, but he goes through a lot of setbacks because he's French and he does not know the cowboy culture, and yet he wants to be considered French. So this one was just finished. I actually got, that's the one that was nominated at the Paris Arts and Movie Festival, and I also have the Nashville Film Festival that is interested in it, so we'll see what it does. But I'm always looking for production companies in Montana to try to keep those in Montana. I would, you know, I'm pushing the production right now, because it's one thing to write all these screenplays, but it's another thing to actually have them the green light to have them produce. And I'm actually looking for investors to be able to self-produce, so that we can, you know, gather some investors who are interested in promoting Montana through movies and would like to have their names on some of these movies. But I have some others. You know, last one that I just entered into contest is called Consumed by Faith. It's the story of somebody who is deep in faith, and he has to have a cell transplant. He has leukemia, and he has to have bone marrow transplant, and he's really struggling with his own faith that tells him that he should not make anything different in his body, but there is of course a sense of survival that says I really should do that in order to live longer. So I have many different scripts, and some of them are kind of, you know, in the works of maybe possibly being produced.
Wow, thank you so much. That is so incredibly exciting. Mrs. Oberweiser, do you have any questions before we shift gears?
I'm just in awe, and would like to know how, I guess I have a question about weather, since we just got, it's changed from fall to winter overnight. What's the climate where you grew up in France?
All right, so I grew up in Bourges, which is in the center of France. It's rather mild. We don't really get a lot of snow, a little bit, but not much. And it's what we call the climat océanique. So oceanic, ocean, influenced by the ocean. It's not that far from the ocean. So usually very much like Portland or Seattle, you know, they don't often get snow. Sometimes they do, just like in Bourges where I was born. It sometimes does get the snow, but it's not a common thing to see snow in Bourges. Now, if you want, I can talk a little bit about the global warming in France in general. Do I have time to do that? Or is that something that everybody might be interested?
Oh, I think that would be wonderful. Yes, please tell us a little bit. Yes.
Yeah, so about our global warming, I must say that the French are probably, I would say, more aware of global warming than we are here in Montana. I know that a lot of people across the United States are very aware of it, but we in Montana, we still get those 4 seasons. It's hot in the summer, it's super cold in the winter. We have snow right now, you probably all do. And we have low temperatures. So we really follow the seasons. Fall is beautiful with the brown, the purple crown that comes to our trees, and spring is a revival. But in France, they have been heavily affected by global warming. 2017 and 2018 were extremely hot. And a lot of people died actually of heat in 2018. 2022, so this year, has seen the hottest summer ever recorded since 1900. It is hot, it is super hot, it is not raining. So when there is no rain, there's not enough water, which means that the French actually have to limit their consumption of water. All through the summer, they were not allowed to wash their cars. They were not allowed to change water in the swimming pools or even refill the swimming pools. They were not allowed to water lawns. So it's real for them. Recently, the water companies have knocked at doors when they have seen that, according to their meter outside, they were using too much water. So they have to limit their laundries, their number of laundries a week. They have to limit the amount of time that they spend in the shower. So it's real in France. They're very, very concerned, and it's all ages. It's not just the younger generations that are aware of this global warming, it's all generations. So it's something that is, I know that you asked me to give some good news. This one I don't think is very good news. The good news is today that it is actually raining, if it can be good news. For the first time for many months, it is raining pretty much all over the map of France.
Well, that kind of leads us where I was heading next, which was a conversation a little bit on the geography and some of the comparisons, contrasts between here and Montana. I'm curious, before we really dig into that, if any of the students in Mrs. Wallner-Drake's class have been to France.
We have one student who has been to Paris.
Oh, fantastic. Well, they can provide some good insight as well on some of these cultural and geographic components too. So tell us a little bit about it. We know about the Alps are there, got the Pyrenees.
Yes.
What's it like?
Yes, France is actually, you think of France as 1/3 bigger than Montana. Okay, so it's not a big country by itself. It's smaller than Texas. It's a little bit bigger than Montana. But the charm of France is that it's the farthest country west in Europe. So it has a huge mileage. I think it's about 1,000 kilometers, which is maybe 750 miles of coastal line. So north is the channel, and then the channel runs into the Atlantic Ocean. And then when you go southeast of France, you have a beautiful sea, which is much warmer than the Atlantic Ocean because it is a sea, so it's a closed area of water, and it's the Mediterranean Sea. So that means that from anywhere in France, you can easily get to the beach. Now, the northern beaches of Normandy, Brittany, they're beautiful, but they tend to be rocky and they tend to be cold. And the further south you go, just like here, the warmer the water is. So when you get to all the way to the Pyrenees, right at the very south of France, it's a chain of mountains that makes the separation between France and Spain. The Pyrenees Mountains, they go from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. And then on each side, if you get to the water is warm. So, it's really south. The Pyrenees and the Alps, so the Pyrenees are in the southwestern part of France at the tip, and the Alps are in the southeastern part of France. They share those mountains with Switzerland and Italy. And both of those chains of mountains, the Pyrenees and the Alps, are considered young mountains. And when you look at those mountains, they have very high, sharp peaks. Very much like a glacier. When I go to glacier, I feel that I'm a little bit in the Alps. It has that closeness, I live in Hamilton where we have this is a very large valley, as opposed to glacier, which is all the mountains are very close to each other. The valleys are not large; they're very narrow. Well, the Alps remind me of glacier. So that means that anywhere you are in France, you're close to the sea and you're close to the mountains. So you can easily drive half a day and get to the beach, or drive half a day and get to the mountains. So it's very, very convenient, and it is very attractive because you can live pretty much anywhere and go on vacation very close for a weekend, a long weekend, and just feel that you're totally uprooted from your flat area of the center of France, for example. So it's neat.
Wonderful. I'm going to open it back up to some questions from Mrs. Wallner-Drake's class. Make sure we get all the questions answered.
Okay, we have a question about tourism in France, and Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong, but so what are tourists accepted in France? Is that what you're looking for? And are there lots of tourists going to visit the mountains and beaches, and maybe some activities that they do in the mountains?
Okay, so what was the first one you said?
Are there a lot of tourists, I guess? Is it a big tourist industry?
There are a lot of tourists. There are a lot of tourists in France. When you go to Paris, you have to get in line to visit the main province, of course, the Eiffel Tower, lots of museums. Even though with museums, you can actually purchase a pass that gives you access to about 50 of those museums. So it's much cheaper to get the pass if you're going to visit, 3 or more museums. And the thing with museums is that there are so many of them that you can never cover them all. You get tired before getting to the end of the first one, but it allows you to cut the lines. It allows you not to have to wait in lines. So yes, there are many tourists. There are millions of tourists each year that come to France. And the two main areas for tourist attractions are, of course, Paris, because Paris has many monuments. The life in Paris is very romantic. We have to admit it's a romantic city. It's a city of lights. It's beautiful. Anywhere you go, you cross the Seine River, you stroll along the Seine River, you have all the cafes and the French culture, all the cliches that are not just cliches, they're really part of real life. But you also have the south of France, which we call here in America, we call it the French Riviera, which is called the Côte d'Azur in France. Those two areas, Paris, right in the center of France, just slightly north, but right in the center, and the French Riviera along the Mediterranean Sea. Everybody has heard about Cannes, Saint-Tropez, Monte Carlo, Monaco. Those are those are on the top list of tourists. But there are other areas, and when I go to France, of course, I like to see my family, but I'll always look for the little villages. I know that for young people, small villages means boring life. Not at all. If you actually want to see what France deeply is, don't go to the big cities, because the big cities are influenced tremendously by the American culture, with fast food that have taken over the traditional French bistro, with 52% of French people eat more burgers for lunch than the traditional baguette and ham sandwich. So that tells you a lot. So yes, big cities are exciting, especially to young people. But if you want to see true, authentic France, go anywhere else. Go to the small villages, the areas that tend to be less touristic. There was a wonderful book that is published that you can find easily. And it's called The Most Beautiful Villages of France. It is a company that has made the effort to go throughout France, that has traveled throughout all the cities and small towns and villages and even hamlets of France. And they have compiled beautiful pictures. And this is a great book, because a lot of these villages they are allowed to survive, because even fewer and fewer people like to live in the rural areas. They would rather go to areas where you have good internet, etc. But if you have the opportunity to go to France, don't miss some of these extraordinary villages that put you 500 years back, because they're medieval villages, but also the culture, the current culture is not influenced by other global cultures. So I highly recommend that. So yes, France is visited by millions of people, but you can still escape from the big crowds of tourists once you're done with the main monuments like the Arc de Triomphe, the Eiffel Tower, some museums like the Louvre, the Quai d'Orsay, Picasso and all that. You can actually escape if you have time and go and step in the true France that I personally like.
Thank you. I think that sounds like a wonderful recommendation.
Yes.
I'm ready to book my trip.
Well, yes, me too.
That's excellent. Well, I know that we do want to focus on some global good news that's coming out of France. And part of the reason we focus on this is that so much of the world that we hear about, especially when we turn on the news, it's bad news. And that seems to be what we hear a lot of the time. And so part of what we're trying to do is bring the humanity back a little bit. When I know we only have a couple of more minutes with Mrs. Wallner-Drake's class. And so I actually wonder, Mrs. Wallner-Drake, I'm going to pick on you guys for a second. I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm wondering if you could share a piece of good news from Bozeman, just to get this last part started. And then Laurence, maybe you could respond with some good news coming from France. So this is Wallner-Drake's class. If you would like to share a piece of good news from Bozeman with us to
Our
start.
internet.
Oh,
Are you there, Allie?
are you there? Yes, I'm here. Are you guys having internet
Are you
problems?
there, Allie?
I am here, Amy. Oh dear. Well, we may have to turn this on its head and have Laurence, will you start? And hopefully Amy's internet is a little bit better. So I'll send her a message in chat and you go ahead and start and share some good news.
All right. Well, as you said, and I guarantee you, I will give you some, just some good news. But France is seriously affected, just like all European countries, by the war in Ukraine. And as it is going to get colder, right now it's not cold yet, so they don't have to turn on their heaters like we do here. It is going to be, a huge problem because the gas has to come from Russia, because oil has to come from Russia. They're negotiating right now with some countries of Africa, with some countries of the Middle East to try to put pressure on Russia and be part of the sanctions. So let's just leave this aside. It's reality. And when I turn on the news, and I have TV5, which is the French TV that allows me to get the news and get all the programs from France, that's basically what it is in the morning. It's about inflation, about the war in Ukraine, about all this. But for the good, bright news, and I don't know if everybody knows that, but in 2024, Paris is hosting the Olympic Games. And they're already preparing for some sensational ceremonies, especially the opening ceremony is going to be on the Seine River. So right now they have engineers and what they call civil designers that are working on some big show for the opening of the Olympic Games in 2024. And that's going to be on the Seine River, which is the big river that flows through Paris. And they promise it to be a unique, never seen before show. That's it for the good news.
That sounds pretty fantastic. Okay, Bozeman, if your internet is working, do you have a piece?
Oh,
good.
That was so exciting. I've seen the plans for the 2024 opening ceremony, and it looks like it's going to be amazing.
Yes.
So thanks for reminding me. Good news, you guys, you just finished your GeoQuest project. So those of you that did good news from Bozeman, could you raise your hand and give us your topic? What do you have? So football and the state championship. So we have some good news from athletics. What else?
Opening more schools.
Okay, opening more schools was another good piece of good news.
People are stopping overfishing in the Madison.
Okay, we're working to kind of regulate our rivers so there's not overfishing, especially when the water gets really warm. Other good news pieces you guys had? Yes.
The housing market's getting better.
The housing market is getting better. It's really expensive to live in Bozeman or buy a new house in Bozeman, and I guess that's getting better, a little bit better anyways. Anything else? Okay, I think that's all we have, Allie.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I know that Mrs. Wallner-Drake's class has to leave here in just 1 minute. So before we go, I would like everybody to take a moment to thank Laurence for spending some time with us and sharing some really insightful and interesting comparisons and tidbits about her home country.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Goodbye, Mrs. Wallner-Drake's class.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Oh, wonderful. I am going to stop the recording.